Welcome everyone, and thank you for being here. Thank you very much to our alumni who are spending their hour with us, and welcome to everyone on YouTube watching this. And we hope that you'll learn something from this panel. And today we'll be talking about mental health. And just as a disclaimer, we are not mental health professionals. We are just students and alumni who have gone some of the challenges that you might face while abroad. So some of our alumni will talk about specific conditions that they have, and others just more general of tips on how to cope with stresses and the emotional roller coaster that you experience as you go on your study abroad journey. So without further ado, let's get started with an introduction. So I'll just go according to the order that's on my screen. So Marley, if you could start with your country, the program that you did, your home campus, and the academic year that you went abroad.
All right, hi everyone, my name is Marley Uemura. I studied abroad in Japan at Waseda University during the 2019-2020 school year, and I went during my third year of attending Cal State Fullerton.
Awesome, thank you, Marley. And Miriam?
Hi everyone, my name is Miriam Gabriel. I studied abroad in Granada, Spain during the 2019-2020 school year and at the Universidad de Granada, and I am currently attending Cal State Northridge, and I went abroad during my last year.
And Jessup, you're up next.
Hi everyone, my name is Jessup. I studied abroad for 2 years. I was in Aix-en-Provence, France for my first year and Paris for my second year. I go to SF State.
And Katie.
Hello everyone, my name is Katie. I graduated from Chico State, Harvard of the West back in the day. I studied abroad in 2016 at CSU Florence, so Florence, Italy. Yeah, and it was an incredible program.
And Haley?
Hi, my name's Haley. I go to Humboldt State University, and I studied in Madrid, Spain in the 2019-2020 school year.
And Christina, you're up.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name's Christina. I also studied abroad in Aix-en-Provence at Aix-Marseille University back in the year 2017 to 2018. I'm an alumni at Long Beach State.
Thank you. And last but not least, Jackie.
Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Jacqueline Reyes, but I go by Jackie. My home university was Cal State LA. I graduated this past May of 2020, but I studied abroad in South Korea. I went to Yonsei University and I studied abroad the year of 2018 to 2019.
Okay, let's get into our questions. What did you learn about abroad that you wish you would have known when selecting a program? And anyone can jump in at any time.
I can go if you want.
Okay, go for it.
So I feel like I wish I would have seen more people of color when, like, I know we all have the orientation before we leave. I wish I would have seen more people of color and gotten their perspective on how their study abroad experience was, just because I know it's very different compared to like non-POCs that go study abroad. So that was something I wish I would have known.
Mm-hmm.
Since this is about mental health, I guess something I wish I had known is that it can get really lonely and isolating at some points. Moving to a foreign country by yourself, not knowing anyone, and really hard to make friends and find community.
Definitely. So let's move on to our next question.
So was your mental health condition a factor in selecting a program? And did you pick a country that would be an easier adjustment for you?
I have an answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
So not necessarily addressing the first part of the question, but more the second. I think subconsciously, I definitely did factor in that studying abroad in Japan as a Japanese American might have been an easier adjustment for me, just because I might have had some kind of former knowledge of the culture, the food, the language a little bit, and just having that extra, like, I guess, knowledge going beforehand, I thought that it would have been an easier adjustment, despite still having my own challenges while abroad.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll add to it. I was just ready to go when I was trying to go abroad, and so I didn't do a whole lot of research. And I ended up in Italy, which was perfect for me in terms of the friends I made. And I really did enjoy the program. However, I didn't do a lot of research beforehand. And speaking from a mental health perspective, I was coming out of like a personal trauma. So I was still working through a lot of mental health issues associated with experiencing trauma. And when I went to Italy, I wasn't fully prepared for how Italian men perceived American women. And it was, I think, a challenge for me. And it did kind of push me forward to really address some of the mental and emotional trauma. And I'm grateful for the outlets that I had, but I think that had I done a little bit more research, I would have been more prepared for that. And could have front loaded in protecting my mental health rather than being reactive.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
I kind of like agree with her. I didn't really expand on my last answer, but that's why I kind of wanted to see more POC, because I feel like if I would have done a little more, because I feel like I already had like a decent understanding of what the culture was in South Korea, but I feel like I didn't do my research enough on how it would be as a woman of color. And I could relate to not having a lot of friends, I feel like, especially Korean friends. So that's something that was kind of hurtful. Like I didn't know, like I feel like I would have got the whole experience maybe if I actually had like Korean friends, but it was still great, but definitely like kind of took a toll on my mental health just because I was like dealing, already with like my own stuff. And now it's like, okay, now it doesn't feel like, it feels like now I have extra baggage of being like abroad.
Thank you. Okay, so how did you and you guys kind of touched on this already, but how did you prepare yourself to go abroad? What research did you do, and who did you talk to?
So for me,
I'd
this
like
was
to...
actually, oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Miriam.
No, you can go ahead first.
Oh, okay, that's nice. Thank you. Yeah, so how did I prepare to go study abroad? I would really say that I spoken to alumni that actually went through the program. So I set up kind of like, I guess Skype back in the day, some video chat calls with them. And I just kind of did my research online and with fellow peers that actually went through the program. So yeah, it was really helpful in setting up with like what specifically to prepare for and like what to pack. And yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, so for me, the way I prepared before going abroad, this was actually one of my biggest challenges because it was actually my first time leaving the country. It was only my second time being on a plane as well. And so it's just a lot. I know back home, I was dealing with a lot of like social anxiety and claustrophobia that I actually had to seek out to a psychologist because I was just very nervous about, my anxiety kind of being one of the leading factors to me not studying abroad because I wouldn't be able to get myself on a plane. And so I remember just kind of like doing so much research on like things I can expect and everything, because I think for me, one of the things that makes me feel very comfortable is having some sense of familiarity, whether it's like, when I'm commuting around through like transportation and everything, it's kind of having like points where I can kind of like calm down if I need to. And so one of the things about studying abroad was just like a new place that I don't really, you know what it looks like or feels like. So it was one of my biggest things that I definitely wanted to tack before like studying abroad. So for me, one of the things I did was I actually, during my physical examination routine, I talked to my doctor and I told her that I wanted to be prescribed Xanax so I can kind of control like the feelings I was, I may encounter if I was on a plane or anything like that. And so one of the things she actually talked to me about was was to seek a psychologist and kind of deal with what exactly this internal anxiety was coming from. And so I was actually very thankful that she did that, because I feel like that would have definitely been my option as well. But for some reason, I kind of just wanted to take the easy route and, kind of just get something prescribed. And so she really encouraged me to, kind of just look into what exactly it was that may have been triggering these emotions, and especially if I were to be abroad, how can I go ahead and handle that? So during the year leading up to me leaving to Spain, I actually started seeing a psychologist, and we kind of just started to talk about those feelings, or those reasons why I might feel anxious to leave and everything. And so during the end of my session, when it was time to leave, I felt very great about everything, where I didn't need any type of prescription. I kind of learned how I can handle my anxiety and like my claustrophobia on a plane and even abroad. And so it really made all that difference when I was in Spain. And so when I was actually in Spain, it actually ended up being more of a safer feeling than I expected. I never really felt anxious or anything like that. I learned a lot of breathing techniques and just things I could kind of deal with when I was going traveling around, and kind of just help ease some of those emotions that I would have felt if prior to seeing a psychologist or anything like that. But yeah, that was definitely very helpful for me, and I'm happy I was able to do that before leaving abroad.
Thank you so much for sharing. So definitely, before you go abroad, if you have the time and the ability to go and have that counseling beforehand and address some of the issues before you even leave, that would be wonderful. Jessup, did you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you. Miriam spoke of familiarity, and I think that's an important point to talk about. And something that I did personally that really helped me out was before going to whatever city, you can go onto Google Maps and use this street view and kind of walk yourself throughout the city. So I know that's something that I did quite a few times before leaving, just getting a sense of what the streets look like, what the front of my apartment building looks like, where I might be dining or spending my time. It's something that for me was kind of like a natural transition almost, because I saw it all already. It wasn't there in front of me physically, but I got to get familiar with where I was going to live before I went, and that was really helpful too.
Definitely. And I think that also just helps with, even like looking at your train routes, Google Maps and the different tools that it has built in can really help with, the street view and just looking over your area. Thank you, Jessup, for that tip. Would anyone else like to tackle this question before we move on to the next one? Okay. So what challenges did you face while abroad?
So I think I had a unique experience in the sense that I had the opportunity to study abroad for 4 semesters. And what really shocked me was it was my 3rd semester that like kind of things started hitting. I lived in X my first year, and everyone has their own personal challenges, but I found that to be an easier city to live in than Paris my 2nd year. And so I kind of went through like a delayed culture shock almost. And I think a huge part of that was due to the culture of my school. So I'd recommend to people, if they have the opportunity to really, I know it's hard from abroad, but research your school. And if you can, maybe talk to alumni to figure out what this culture towards international students and what sort resources they have. at the school abroad, you know, what they have, how can they help you. And personally, I kind of struggled with isolation that semester, that first semester in Paris. And so for anyone going to a big city, you know, that's something that you're going to have to deal with. And I just found that kind of just taking it like first you have to notice it, but once you notice it and realize it, taking concrete steps towards kind of regaining a social life. You know, CSUIP is going to provide a ton of activities to do. Sign up for every single one of them. You know, just forcing yourself to be a social animal, because it's really easily done. It's easy to become isolated while abroad if you're not, you know, purposefully putting yourself out there, which is, I know, easier said than done, but that's sometimes like just a reality check that you have to give yourself is like, you know what, I've noticed that I'm not putting myself out there as much as I could be. Time to change that.
Thank you. Definitely. Like you said, easier said than done, but it is worth it to go out there, make those connections. And remember, the uncomfortable part is kind of part of study abroad. A lot of students say they want to step out of their comfort zone. And so you'll have challenges like that. But like Jessup said, it is worth it to make those connections and put yourself out there. So Jackie, you wanted to answer as well?
Yes, so I hope we can put a little trigger warning, but I wasn't the only one that experienced this. I met other people who had gone through the same thing, but I had a friend who passed away when I was studying abroad, and then I met somebody else who was my friend who had his dad pass away when we were studying abroad. So that was really hard. It's easy to feel guilty when you're in a foreign country and be like, why wasn't I there? So I don't want to scare anyone, you know, but that's like always a possibility, but always having like people that surround you that you can rely on, and just, you know, feeling what you feel, and like having like a safe zone, basically like a net where you could just be like, okay, you know what, like I'm feeling this way, right? Like, and they're going to set everything and just be there for you. So that's definitely one of the challenges that I faced when I was studying abroad.
Thank you for sharing that.
Is it okay if I also say
Yeah.
something just in addition to that? So like Jackie was talking about having like a friend and meeting somebody that also had like a family member pass away while you were abroad. I also went through something like that, and through studying abroad, one of the things that they really talk about at the beginning is being flexible and realizing that there are some things that are out of your control that you are going to have to just kind of roll with. And it's really easy to kind of feel like guilty or like hopeless that you can't really be there with your family or with your friends' families, or that you can't be in the same place at the same time. And to experience those changes away from home, I guess, can be really hard to digest and to kind of just take in. But as Jackie also said, you know, to have like even one person to talk to that really understands and will listen to you when you need somebody to talk to about those kinds of things really was helpful. Like, I know that when I was going through some stuff and I've experienced some stuff while I was abroad, I definitely reached out to my IP coordinator, Hiroko-san. She was great. And it's because I wasn't confident enough in my ability to speak and to convey those feelings in, you know, Japanese at the time, nor did like my host family or like other people who were from there didn't really understand the depth of like, I guess, the hurt that I was going through. So to reach out to somebody who was very understanding and willing to listen, and who also just really looked out for us, meant a lot to me, and I'll always be grateful for her compassion. So just reaching out to people and to, you know, not only have shoulders to lean on, but to be that shoulder to lean on for other people is just such a good thing to keep in mind when you're abroad, because it is hard to be so far away from home and to go through so many things that are so like unpredictable, things that's so out of your control. So to have that support is, you know, just such a good thing. And I guess I'm grateful for like the friends that I was able to count on during, you know, just adjusting in general. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Marley and I did the same program, and our CSUIP coordinator, she was just so golden. We called her mom, and so we would go to her. And so depending on what program you're going on, you know, you might have an in-country staff member there who you could turn to and talk to, and just somebody who might have also an understanding of American culture and kind of be that bridge for you if you're not comfortable with going to someone from your host country. So thank you so much, Marley, for sharing that. Does anyone else like to answer this question before we move on to the next one?
I wanted to second what Jessup was saying, and also add about like researching and thinking about the host school, that academics can be really hard. And taking classes in your second language can be really hard, and that took a huge toll on my mental health. Like how difficult the classes were, and I like at one point I went to my advisor, and I was after midterms, and I was like, I don't know if I can continue next semester because this is so hard for me. And he got me a tutor, and that helped a lot. But it's, yeah, just researching the school and thinking about that is a good thing to do.
Thank you so much, Haley, for sharing that. As you can see, like all of the other panelists, a lot of our heads were nodding. So yes, you know, academics, you know, this is study abroad. So academics can definitely be one of the challenges that you face. And just like Haley said, reach out to your advisors, and that could be your CSU IP or advisor, or the in-country advisor, and see if there are resources that you could avail of to get that help for the following semester, or if you're still within the first one, can help you for the rest of the semester. So always look, you know, good idea to research beforehand. If you're already in country, ask about resources that might help you at your university.
Can I actually add something really quickly? Yeah, so it's really interesting that when I was listening to everyone that I think I don't know if it's a thing that just going abroad, but I think knowing that everyone is going through it, so it's like a very shared experience of like, we all have our struggles of adapting and like having a learning curve to studying abroad. So I think after listening to everyone, I think that's something to be mindful of, and then to just like talk about it, because then people will be like, oh, me too. So
thank you so much, Christina, for sharing that. Yes, you are not the only one who are struggling, you know, with things like this. A lot of your other classmates, especially if your university has a big, you know, international student population, then a lot of these other students, or just from your own CSUIP program, will be going through the same challenges. So talk about it, share with others, and there is something cathartic about, you know, sharing your own story and hearing other people share their story. So as everyone's been saying, lean on each other and lean on the available resources to you. Thank you. Okay, so for our next question, Whitney, you want to tackle this one?
Yeah. So our next question is, did you disclose your mental health condition to CSUIP? And if you hadn't, did you wish that you had?
I didn't like preface to anybody some of the things I'd been through recently. And a part of that, you know, I think a lot of times you're like, I'm going to go abroad, I'm just going to get away from it all. But life happens, life follows you. And so I, in hindsight, definitely wish I would have at least spoke up a little bit, because I think what happened then was when I wasn't feeling safe and supported by my administration, I was like kind of bitter and angry. But the truth is, like, I hadn't spoken up that I needed to feel safe, that I was needing that extra support. And so I approached it from a place of feeling like misunderstood and angry. And I think that in hindsight, as an older and wiser woman, if I just would have been a little bit more honest with myself and honest with the people who were there to support me, it would have just been a smoother transition to getting the help I needed, rather than being like, feeling like, oh, nobody's here to help me.
Thank you for sharing. Definitely. Like, I know I have a really difficult time asking for help. And so sometimes I'm just like, I'll figure it out on your own. But, there are, you're, part of your program. They're willing and happy to help. So go ahead. It might feel uncomfortable to ask for help, and it's really nerve-wracking to ask for help. But in the long run, it does get a lot easier when you have a support system with you. So would anyone else like to answer this question?
I can go. I actually did disclose my mental health, which I used to suffer from depression. Thankfully, that's done with. But I feel like when I disclosed it, I wasn't being honest about how bad it was. I feel like I sugarcoated it, but I feel like that was because, like, in life in general, that's just how I went my life living. Like, I was like, if I sugarcoat this, if I make this seem like if it's smaller than it actually is, like, it'll be okay. So I basically did, like, kind of like what some other people have mentioned, like, I went abroad and I thought it was going to go away. It wasn't. My recommendation for anybody that goes abroad is kind of to be in tune with yourself. Like, are you feeling okay? Check up with yourself before you go abroad, because when you go abroad, it's not going to go away. You're going to have like all that baggage that you've been having, and now you're going to have additional baggage from the anxiety of learning a new culture and being in a foreign country. And maybe you might feel like you don't have the support you need. So definitely ask yourself and check in with yourself. And if not, don't be afraid to reach out, like especially to the CSUIP coordinators. I didn't have one. I don't think I did, but I know they could be great help.
Thank you for sharing. Definitely. I remember like that was one of the things on the application where it said like, is there anything you want to tell CSUIP, whether medical or mental health? And I was just like, well, it's an application. I don't want them to think that like, oh, this isn't a good student. But no, like they ask that so that they can help you. And being on the ambassador program, like, and getting kind of like the background information of how they do this application process. That question is there so that they can help you and support you and make resources available to you. It's not to disqualify you. So if you're applying and you're thinking, oh, will this disqualify me from the program? No, it's just so that they can support you better. So thank you for sharing on this too. And we'll move on to the next question if nobody else has anything to add. Feel free to jump in though.
Yeah, I have a quick thing to add just before we move to the next question. I know that it can be really nerve-wracking to, let's say you hadn't disclosed, any pre-existing, difficulties or conditions, then know that you can always talk to a coordinator, after the fact. You don't have to, say beforehand. They're always there to help you. That's literally their job, is to make your transition smoother into the country. And if you at some point feel that you need help, but a coordinator is a little bit daunting, maybe try, if you're fortunate enough to trust someone enough that's not administration, try a friend or something like that. I know that my roommate and I in Paris, we eventually both had the kind of the muster to go out and talk to one another about how we're feeling. And we both realized that, oh man, we're going through the same thing right now and we didn't even know. And that was really fortunate that we could use each other as a support system. I know we get into that later, but kind of like you don't have to go straight to an administrator. I guess my point is that there are levels as well that you can take. Just try to think of your support group. In which level are you comfortable disclosing your personal information with?
Thank you so much for sharing that. Definitely, avail of other friends and students, and that, they might be going through the same thing with you and they can support you and you can support them as well. Did you have a support system back home? If so, did you make a plan to communicate with them regularly?
I just wanted to say, yes, I did. My mom is like my number one supporter. I talk to her quite often, especially like because I did have to get sent home due to COVID. I just remember like the 3-4 days notice that we got was kind of nerve-wracking at the beginning because I had like my whole new life sprawled out in my room at like my tiny room at my host parents' house, and then all of a sudden they're like, you have to come home in 4 days or else like you won't like you'll be there illegally and you won't be able to come back. And just like that very short window of time, I was like, oh my gosh, like can I do this? Like I have to do this by myself. Like I can't have somebody hold my hand this whole process. I have to be very proactive. I need to like get my things together. I need to ship things home. So yeah, during that time, I know like my mom and I were on the phone for like hours, just making sure like, oh, is it okay if I ship this stuff home? Like I know it's going to be expensive. And she was just like, yeah, no, just get home and be safe. So I know we had a lot of really late night calls for her, you know, late nights for me. And just having that support system that I knew that I can come back to when, you know, I did have a moment where I just needed to talk to somebody or just needed that kind of reassurance that like not only was I going to be okay, but also that, you know, in addition to like my mom, that I had friends and like family to come back to when I came back to the States, because I didn't keep in touch like with a ton of friends while I was abroad, only like a select handful of them. But because of like those like handful of people, I was reassured that, you know, even when I came back, that like my friends would still hang out with me and stuff. And there were a lot of friends that didn't contact me while I was abroad, or I didn't contact them just because, you know, we weren't really that close. And I really realized like which friends were my real friends, I guess, while I was abroad, because like my real friends were constantly reaching out, or they'd see my stories and they'd see like I'd go to somewhere really cool and they'd be like, hey, like I can't wait to hear about that and that kind of thing. So it was those people that really kept me excited, you know, to be there too. And yeah, I don't know, it was just really comforting and reassuring to know that there were people that still cared.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. So for everyone else, when talking back to people back home, did you have like a set schedule, or just like talk to whenever, you know, things came up? How did you guys do it?
Well, I kind of like figured out like when my mom was available, and I probably talked to her almost like every day, which is probably bad, but like I would call her on WhatsApp a lot. You know, because I rely on her a lot here also. So
Oh, Haley, you went back on mute. Did you still want to say something?
oh no, that's all I had to say.
Okay, I think your video was just lagging because. Okay.
And figuring out the time difference.
Mm-hmm. Katie, did you want to add, or Jackie? Whoever wants to go first.
I think that this question, it kind of like just, I'm almost like grappling with it because I was abroad while Trump was elected president. And at the time, my girlfriend was a woman of color whose parents were undocumented. I had a lot of really important people in my life back home who were going to be impacted by some of the platforms that he ran on. And it just was really difficult knowing that my systems of support back home were also really needing my support while I was abroad, and feeling like super helpless. Like I wasn't there to support, you know, my people. I wasn't there to soothe those people who were being like deeply affected, and having a very like real emotional response to our changing political structures and cultures. So it was just this balancing act of being so grateful to have them as a system of support, and doing what I could to still be a change maker, even though I wasn't present with them, and to still be a rock, and to still like assess my privilege, my communities, like how I could show up for them in a system of support. So it was just like a very delicate balancing act of like, yes, I have people back home who are supporting me, but those people also really need my support. And I just can't like, you know, I think was a part of my culture shock was I was running around for a couple months, like not really caring about home until I was hit with that realization that like, there's real stuff happening. And, you know, I also feel like I need to be a strong system of support. So my answer is kind of convoluted, but all of that is to say that like, yeah, my systems of support also needed me. And I had to reassess how I was showing up while I was abroad for those people, if that makes any sense.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for sharing that. I think definitely like when you go abroad and you're like, oh, everything around me is new and different, to also keep in mind that for either your family or your friends, it's the opposite where everything is the same, but there's just something wrong. There's just something missing, and that's you. So I remember when my sister moved, so this was back in the Philippines, moved to a different country. And my mom said, like, it's like every part of her that interacted with one of my siblings was suddenly gone. So she didn't just lose my sister, but also my sister and my interaction with her, my sister and her interaction with my brother. So your family might be dealing with something like that, and your friends as well. So it's a very good point where, we need our support systems, but we are also part of a bigger support system that we're there to support other people as well. And Jackie, did you want to say something? Finally get to you.
Yeah. Okay, so it's really important to have a support system. I know I came up with a routine. Like, every morning when I was on my way to school, I would call my dad. Of course, you always have to take a note about the time difference. Since I was in Korea in the morning, I think it was the day before, and it was like going on to the night, I believe, if I recall. Yeah. And it's really important as well because when my friend passed, like, I wasn't really sure who to talk to, and I didn't feel like really, really comfortable with talking to my roommate about it. So I remember calling my dad, and just, it was kind of like nice, not nice, but like helpful hearing someone's voice telling me to, like, it's okay, like it's gonna be okay, like, and having someone that was basically gonna kind of take on my role while I wasn't there. It was just like really reassuring at the moment, and it felt like I was home, like, and I don't know, I felt like I was being like cuddled like by my dad and being like, it's okay, like it's gonna be okay. So it's really important. Like, I hope you guys set one up and have like a routine. Yeah, because if not, it's gonna be all over the place. And when you're studying abroad, things go by really fast, and like your classes like are gonna take up most of your time. Like, it's gonna be a little bit chaotic.
Definitely having a routine and also like knowing the time difference is really good. And also just having that conversation with your family as well, or your friends beforehand, that, oh, I might not always have the time to have long conversations, but I just want to check in with you, say hi, how was your day? So like sometimes I'll be making breakfast and say, hey, are we good? Give me a quick update about the family, and then say, okay, I have to get on the train now, bye. So like reaching out to people, it doesn't have to be long conversations, and you don't have to catch up with everything that's happened, but just having those occasional check-ins and just having a quick hi, how are you, and speak to someone from home is really helpful. Thank you everyone for sharing that. Okay, so for this question, we talked about a support system back home. Were you able to form a support system while abroad?
I think I'll go ahead and chime in on this one. I think in the first semester when I was studying abroad, it was kind of a little bit difficult because I think I had that mindset that, oh yeah, it's just me going through all this stuff in terms of a learning curve. But when I kind of started opening up to other people around me, the second semester was just like, wow, it went by really fast. Like, because you just mingled with a lot of different people. And in that way, you just kind of branch out even to other expat communities. So we were able to have gatherings like hiking trips and like go out and eat at restaurants and whatnot. So I think for me at Aix-en-Provence, the expat community was a great resource there, just because we had those shared experiences that made it fun.
Yeah, thank you. Reaching out and having those groups is really great. Anyone else?
I just wanted to add that, yeah, I'll definitely say, like, I think one of like my main, I guess, support systems or while I was abroad were definitely like people from my cohort. So I kind of feel like I had a hard time trying to like meet friends from Japan, with the exception of like a few. But even though like we didn't get to spend the full year together, I definitely think, and like I didn't get super close to like everybody in my cohort either. Um, but I think just being able to like eat lunch together every day, or to talk in between classes and to talk about similar experiences that we might be facing with like either homesickness or like maybe a food that we missed, it was just really comforting to have that system and to be able to bond with them the few times that we did. Even though like I didn't get to necessarily bond with each and every one of them, I always tell like prospective students during peer advising, or just anybody who asks about study abroad in general, how awesome my cohort was. So shout out to them. And I also joined a kickboxing gym while I was abroad, a couple months before I left. And honestly, it was kind of crazy at first because, you know, it was one of those things where I was kind of trying to pick something up that would be healthy for me and healthy outlet, where I could meet people that were from there. And, I met a lot of really awesome people and I got to kickbox with them and it was really fun. So I definitely will want to visit there when I go back. And last but not least, I did have my host family that was there for me. They really took care of me and they really looked out for me as one of their own. And they definitely were like really good. They were like really like parents. They were like grandparents to me almost, because like I didn't really grow up with grandparents, but that's what it probably would have felt like if I did. And they still respected my space and my freedom. So I still keep in touch with them today. And I definitely think that by having and by forming those connections and those support systems while you're abroad is so important, because as we kind of talked about a little previously, not like everybody might be going through their own things, and to talk about it together and to see maybe we're not so different after all is a really good way to just kind of bring everybody together.
So I actually want to give the opposite advice. I relied way too heavily on like the other Americans I knew, and it backfired big time. And like I really like, I'm kind of a socially anxious person, so like getting out of my shell, branching out, that was really hard for me. But it's necessary. And like just find whatever ways you can to socialize. Don't just stick to the Americans around you.
Yeah, I think that like my tactic was a combination of Marley and Haley, and something Christina and Jessup mentioned earlier too was knowing that I was most likely not the only person going through these things. I actually started having community conversation nights at my house. So I would just like reach out to my cohort, or just kind of like have, the homies spread the word. And I'd be like, hey y'all, tonight, like, I don't know, I'm feeling really heavy about being a queer woman in Italy. Like, if you're also struggling with LGBTQ plus issues, like, come on over. And people I'd never spoken to like came over and we got to chat about that experience. We had conversations that were just about like your favorite Disney movie, to like you know, your struggling relationship with your brother. Like, it was just in my knowing that like I wasn't alone, I also felt empowered to create community, and just be creative with it. So that was really special for me. And then when I first was abroad, I met the most incredible group of women. They're still my closest friends to this day. But when I framed being abroad from like my own personal experience, especially the language of like, oh, I get to learn a new language, to like, this language is an opportunity for me to connect to a whole different group of human beings. Not only did my language skills skyrocket, but I felt a lot more confident in just trying to have conversations with people. And so that allowed me to connect with the Italian community in a new way. And so, yeah, I just think being creative and being intentional with the people you have around you and the skills you have inside of you.
Yeah, I think that's such a great, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I think I love that you said create community. And that's something that I think we can probably, you know, all share and like maybe give that advice to the people that are watching this is that, you know, we were talking about getting out into the community and putting yourself out there before. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, create a community that's comfortable for you, you know? Like, for example, I did a cooking club because I love food and I want to be able to cook good food. So I just like, it started with like a couple of friends, like 2 friends, you know, just coming over to cook a random meal, whatever. And that turned into a weekly affair, more and more people coming and creating that routine like we talked about. And then also that support group in country. It will naturally diverge into deeper conversations, more important and relevant conversations. Those will come with any community that you put yourself into. If you know, put yourself into it 100%, whether that's a community that's already established or one that you create yourself. So don't feel limited in any capacity. Study abroad gives you so many opportunities to do things that you never, you know, would have thought of doing beforehand.
Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. That's a lot of good advice. Whether you know, you do want to make friends with your cohort, but you also want to branch out and talk to people in country. So having a little bit of both and having both support systems, you know, you can have the best of both worlds. And like Jessup said, make it for yourself. If there isn't one present. I remember one of the CSU IP dinners that we had. I'm not a social person, and so I was just like, we have like these couple of people in our group who are just social butterflies, you know, would go from table to table, and I was just like, oh, you know, I hope they go to my table and they talk to me, and I was just like, wait, why am I waiting for them to talk to me? How about I go up and, you know, talk to these people? And so just having like little switches like that and checking yourself and say, hey, what can I do? What is within my control to create this community? So yeah, thank you, everyone. And for our next question.
So our next question is, were you able to continue treatment abroad, and have you continued access to any medication while you were abroad?
I continued treatment. I continued to see a mental health professional only after, you know, after you start to feel really crappy is when you're like, maybe I should talk to somebody. So that is where I do think in hindsight, I would have loved to express to CSUIP in advance so I could have started it. But yeah, I continued it. I was abroad and I was like, no way that there's a psychologist who speaks English and knows what I'm going through. But lo and behold, people are talented and capable of many things. So I had plenty of options. So I did continue treatment and it was awesome.
Thank you. And Katie, were you able to, did you find that on your own or through the insurance that was provided? How did you find help?
Yeah. So I went through the insurance that was provided, and I went through the system, and that was really awesome. And because of that, I was able to look at different options too. This is just like, I'm probably gonna toot my own horn for a second. I also saw some areas where I felt like there could be improvement. And so I was able to work with administration to get like the women in our classes free self-defense classes if they wanted to do this. And yeah, so I not only went through the system, but I got to work with the system to give my input on where I felt like some areas of growth could be. So I was super grateful for the relationship I built in that.
Thanks for sharing. Yes, definitely. Like, at least for my program, we had multiple insurances because you get one through CSUIP, and then you get one in country, and then you had another one through the school. So it was just like insurance on top of insurance. So there are several things that can help you. Anyone else?
I didn't continue seeking a psychologist while I was in Spain. And looking back, I actually really regret not doing so, because I think part of me, I guess there was kind of like some guilt in there where like I had already been seeing someone the previous year, and I felt okay. When I arrived to Spain, I think I was just kind of like in this, just kind of like living through, and I felt fine. But what I didn't realize later on is that I think Jessup talked about earlier. I too also experienced like a delayed culture shock, and so it came later on where I did start feeling like very anxious again and everything, and my support system back home. Another thing I didn't realize was the time difference. So when I did want to reach out and everything, maybe those people weren't there for me at the moment, and so I wish if I would have at least continued seeking the advice of a psychologist, I could have had someone to talk to and kind of just relay some of the things I was feeling and everything, and not so much rely on me doing it myself all the time. But I wish that was something I would have continued doing. So.
I want to second what Miriam said. I wish I had taken advantage of that option of getting a psychologist. But I also want to add, I'm not on any meds for mental health, but I'm on meds for other reasons, and I had to get all like a year's worth in advance. I don't know I don't know if that's the case for all medicines, or like how you would go about getting medicine in country. But that was my experience. That was the advice I got, and yeah.
Thank you, Haley. And I believe a lot of our other alumni from the previous mental health panel also did say that they got their medication in advance. Would you like to talk about like what the process was for you to like, was it talking to your insurance or your doctor to get that medication? What was the process?
So I have Kaiser, and I had to like talk to my doctors beforehand and explain the situation, and they were able to, prescribe me the longer supply.
Okay, so also just on medication, I remember from the previous panel, and this is what I did as well, was ask for a vacation override. And so for my insurance, it allowed me to have my medication 3 months in advance. And so sometimes you would, if you're still preparing for study abroad and you have a lot of time, ask for a vacation override. They'll give you 3 months worth, and then at least for my insurance, in a month, I was able to ask for another vacation override. So I had 6 months worth of medication when I went on study abroad. So that's a term that you could use when either talking to your doctor or your insurance, so that you can have medication. Also through the insurance that CSUIP provides, if you call them and you give them a list of medication that you're currently taking, they'll tell you what the name is in the country that you're going to, so that you can go to a pharmacy there. So that might be a little bit more difficult to find medication, but they are able to provide that service. And if possible, I would say get it while you're still in the US, bring it abroad, and just double check on laws, because certain medications you might have to have special permission if you're bringing it into another country, because they might have different laws concerning that specific medication. Okay, so we are coming up on the hour mark. So if any of our panelists need to go, we totally understand. And thank you for your time. We do have 3 questions left. And this one is, what was your self-care routine at home? Were you able to continue it while abroad?
I know I'm technically not a panelist, but I like this question. And I'm someone who really likes to stick to routine, and I'm also like someone I'm an only child, so I need my own space. Like, it is very important for me to kind of have that time where it's just me, like, by myself. So what I would do is once a week, it would kind of change every week just because of travels and school and whatnot. But I would just pick every, like, one day a week, every night for like an hour, and I would literally just schedule it and like turn my phone on airplane mode. I wouldn't like talk to anyone, like whether they were in France, because I studied at Aix-Marseille University in Aix-en-Provence, France. Whether they were in Aix or whether they were back home, I was like, I'm not talking to anyone, and I just need time for me. And like my favorite thing is to watch YouTube videos, so I would really schedule out that time while I was abroad as well, to kind of just have that cool down and like not have so much French in my ear, because I mean, like, it was everywhere and it was like overwhelming me to the point where I was kind of starting to dislike the language. So I needed that time to just really have everything like in English and just like be by myself. So yeah.
Thanks for sharing, definitely. Especially what you said about it being overwhelming. I remember like one time I was just like, there was an American restaurant and I was just like, I want to eat there. And, you know, so like sometimes when you're abroad, you do get a lot of culture, and sometimes you're just looking for something familiar. So take that time to care for yourself. And if nobody else wants to, oh, go ahead.
Actually, so I developed what is now like one of my favorite things, like my favorite like self-care habits, while I was in Spain actually, and it was going on walks and listening to podcasts. I loved my neighborhood in Spain, like walking around. Like I could actually like walk around there at night. It was weird coming from America, but it felt safe because like everyone was out. And but yeah, this like, I think just in general, finding something that like keeps you sane is so important. You know, finding a self-care routine is so important.
Yes, definitely.
One more thing. I guess I didn't really have like a routine per se, but whenever like I needed to get something off my chest, I found that journaling was really good. I also really enjoy photography, so sometimes I would go around the city and take the train by myself and just go for a walk in nature, or go to one of like, there's a lot of parks in Tokyo. So I would sometimes go to either a park, or I know there were a couple times where like I went on like a 2-hour walk from like one of our train stations and all the way to my house, just because I wanted to see what I couldn't see on the train. So I took a lot of walks by myself, just to kind of not just get lost in the city, but just to kind of I don't know, to clear my mind. It was just nice to have that freedom, knowing that I was safe to walk around there. Like, as like a woman in my 20s, like it was nice to know that like I didn't have to worry or look over my shoulder like every 5 seconds. So that was really reassuring, something that I really liked abroad that obviously I don't really do too much now. Um, but between that, and I also really like singing, and my host dad taught like karaoke. I know it's hard to believe that you could teach karaoke, but apparently it's a thing in Japan, and my host dad did. So he taught me some Japanese songs, and now it's kind of become a hobby and a favorite pastime to kind of do that when I'm stressed. So definitely good to find something, and I don't know, it's just comforting and it takes me back.
That is so cool. Thank you for sharing. Definitely, you know, if you're in a safe neighborhood, go and take a walk. And also, when you're walking and you're at street level, you never know what shops or, you know, places you'll discover on foot, take it slow instead of riding either public transportation or a car. Go out for a stroll, and that could definitely be a big part of your care routine.
I want to second the journaling thing. There's almost never a better time in your life to journal than when you're studying abroad. You've never run out of things to write about, and it really helped me, like get organize my thoughts and process things, and it was very helpful.
Definitely, yeah. So getting a written account, years from now, you're going to thank yourself when you look back on those journals and like, oh, on this day in this country, this is what I was doing. So yeah, go ahead and journal. That's something that can be very helpful indeed. Okay, for our next question, some students may have undiagnosed mental health conditions prior to going abroad, and then being abroad and in the new environment can heighten the symptoms. Was anyone diagnosed with a mental health condition while abroad?
No one?
I can talk about that. It wasn't really from my side, but my roommate, because I decided to go abroad with my friend, like that it wouldn't be too hard. But I feel like I don't think she actually disclosed that. Like, I don't even think she knew that she was kind of depressed. But because she was really close to her family, and although I'm really close to my family, I feel like I grew up very independent. So when we studied abroad, like I kind of noticed that she was getting like depressed and then more depressed and more depressed. Like, and I feel like also the weight of like the academics was like really hitting her. Like, I know she would like cry frequently, and it was just really hard for her just to being away from home. So I think this is when like this is why I'm gonna bring it up again, being in tune with yourself and knowing yourself and like keeping track of like those signs before you go abroad, because everything is just gonna get like not more difficult, but it's gonna be like something new now. Like now you're gonna, if you were anxious before, at least you knew you were anxious, right? Maybe you could even come up with a plan. But going into like a foreign country, it's like, oh crap, now I'm anxious in a foreign country. What are my resources, right? It's like I feel like people go into panic, and I felt like that's what my friend did, and she didn't really reach out to anyone, which is something she could have done.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really huge point that you've mentioned a couple of times actually, that going abroad amplifies whatever you like have when you're back in the States. So like if you're, like you were saying, anxious, or even it could be positive things, like if you're really self-motivated, or if you're, I don't know, but anyway, but those things amplify themselves while you're abroad because it puts you in a situation that's so foreign to you because you're in a foreign country. Like you're by yourself in terms of like you don't have that support system back home around you 24/7. Yes, they may be a phone call away or text away, but it's not the same all the time as being in person, physical, you know, when you just need a hug from mom or dad or something like that.
Yeah, like, so I had been diagnosed with adjustment disorder or situational depression and anxiety before. And I didn't think going in, oh, yeah, maybe I'm prone to that. Maybe I'm prone to like things triggering depression and anxiety in me. And a big transition like that definitely did that. Like it heightens that, yeah.
Definitely. Study abroad, there's a lot of changes, not just, in terms of culture, but just like in any move, you're, from your room to your classes, how classes are run, the actual culture, and something as simple as going and shopping and you're like, oh, I can't read the ingredients on what I'm trying to buy, things like that can bring out a lot of stress and anxiety. So being aware of that is really helpful. And like what was mentioned earlier, journaling. So I remember doing this exercise where for 2 weeks, whenever my mood would change, I would take a moment and then like just jot it down and like, okay, what actually happened, and analyzing your thoughts between an activating event and what was your response, and then and looking back at your thinking, and you're just like, was my conclusion true to the activating event, or was I making assumptions? And you know, with a different culture, there are going to be times when you realize like, oh, I thought they were being rude, but actually, you know, they don't smile that much in that culture, or they don't do certain body language gestures. You know, we rely a lot on like people smiling, or how people move their hands as indicators of friendliness. But in a certain culture, you know, that might not be the case. And so being aware of those things, and just keeping that in mind as you go on your study abroad. Okay, so we are coming up on our last question. And it is, were there any cultural differences that you discover about your host country in regards to mental health?
I think I'll just say briefly that from my experience in Aix-en-Provence, and I know that Whitney and Jessup could probably say something about this too. I would say it's about the same, but I'd like to hear from them for their experiences. But for me, I felt like it's a similar mentality and approach and acceptance. Maybe there may be a little bit more acceptance about mental health, but that is from my experience.
So one of the main reasons why I actually wanted to study abroad in Japan as a Japanese American is because I was a human services major at the time with a focus in mental health. And I was really concerned with like the growing number of trigger warning of suicides in Japan in some of the recent years. The numbers were really going up. And as somebody who is really not only into, I guess, spreading awareness and like breaking the stigma and things like that, I wanted to know what kind of resources folks there in Japan had when it came to, you know, reaching out and speaking about mental health. Because from like the minor research that I did prior to leaving, I definitely did learn that, you know, people in Japan still don't really talk about mental health nearly as freely as we do here in the United States. The stigma, I guess, surrounding mental health is kind of strong, and I think, you know, because I did have a couple of breakdowns while I was abroad, and like my host parents didn't know what to do with me because they were just like, oh my gosh, like she started crying, like what do we do? But like it's because I was going through things internally, and you know, with the language barrier, the cultural barrier, the generational barrier, you know, there were so many barriers that it was really hard to kind of break down what I was going through and communicate that with other people there, to the extent that I wish I could have. You know, even for, I know people kind of talked about reaching out to like services that they had, like maybe on their campus when it came to like mental health earlier. And one of the things that I did was, because I kind of had a traumatic experience while I was abroad, I did go to like the on-campus services that did cater to English speaking students. And you know, I just don't feel like, for right now, I feel like they could do better in terms of like the experience that they provide, you know, foreign students when it comes to mental health. And I know that they're still learning, and that's still kind of a new concept to really talk about openly in Japan. I think, you know, I recognize there are certain programs that are being developed by, you know, students around our age, you know, from Japanese universities who are Japanese, you know, that they realize that there is a problem and they are talking about it more and more. But it's definitely something that's still very new. So I think if somebody were to want to study in a country like that, that may not be as open as, you know, we might be in the States saying like, oh, like I went to therapy today, like as like a normal kind of thing that we talk about. It's not normalized there like it is here. So it's just one of those things to really research and to keep in mind when going abroad.
Ooh, can I like just second that? Because I went to South Korea and it's almost the same exact thing. Like in most Asian countries, like mental health is a big taboo there. So that's why when I said I didn't reach out to anyone and I don't think we even had anyone on campus at the time, since me and my friend were the first people to go to Yonsei University from Cal State. We didn't really know, like, I don't even think there was anything, but this is when it's important to create a support system, because maybe there might not be any resources for you, but if you create like a group of people that understand, then kind of become the change you want to see, right? Because I know for myself and for my group, like, even though I was really depressed, I was like, I'm gonna be that loud person that openly talks about mental health, because we're all going through it. Like, it's not gonna help if we're all quiet about it. Like, because I know, like, maybe if it was just us like talking about it, I'm pretty sure there was other like Koreans that were suffering from mental health, and since we had joined this club, I would even talk about it there. So I was like, yeah, like, we're in here in South Korea talking about mental health because it matters and it's important.
Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. Definitely, when I went through some depression and anxiety recovery training, and one of the things that they talked about is how it affects people differently. And for some people, it's a deep sadness. For others, it's a feeling of emptiness. And they go about and just think this is normal, and oh, this is just what life is. But that's not normal, and there is things that could help alleviate some of that, and so talking about it is a very big thing, because sometimes people might just not know that that's not normal, or that they might help, and that there might be a bigger underlying reason for that feeling. So thank you both for sharing that. Anyone else?
Yeah, I just want to talk about norms for a second. It's so important to realize when things aren't normal, but sometimes because of your situation and where you're living, it's hard to realize that things aren't normal. For example, what got to me my first semester in Paris was almost like a culture shock in the way of the way the city operates. There's a term there that every Parisian knows. It's métro, boulot, dodo. That's just like, you take the metro, you go to work, you go to sleep. And that's on the surface, like a lot of how Paris operates. And I know it's not the only big city in the world that operates in that way. But that's something that, like, that was a routine that I actually at first embraced in a way. Like, I thought it was so cool that I was commuting with like 4 million other people on the metro every day. And then I realized after about a month or two of sardining into metros and working really hard, commuting over an hour each day, etc., that I wasn't feeling great mentally. And maybe it was a little bit because the way we were talking about putting ourselves out there. There's a little bit of that, but there's also a bit of falling into norms and accepting that they're normal and that's okay, but it's really not. So I just wanted to say that is like you're going to be pressured into cultural norms and city norms or regional norms, whatever. And just because they're norms doesn't mean that they're right. And then one other quick thing I wanted to know, Haley and I talked about it a little bit earlier, but researching your schools first, I think that's so important. And also not being afraid to change schools if you have the opportunity, if you're not feeling right. For example, like my school, like the first school I went to in Paris, you go onto the website and there's nothing about, and I guess for people that are looking to Paris too, is Paris 8 was the first school I went to. There's nothing on their website about what an international student faculty may look like or resources or whatever. The second school I changed because I wanted to do something about my situation. I changed schools, and on that website, there is information about, oh, this is what our international community looks like. This is what we're doing to provide international students resources, etc. So if you have, I know it's not the same for every country, but if you have the opportunity to research different schools within the city or country you're looking at, maybe just simply go onto their page, their website, and see if they even have a tab for international students. Do they care about their international students?
Definitely. Thank you for sharing that. And so a lot of the countries have either multiple schools or multiple programs within a school. So do some research, look into that and what the culture of the campus might be like. And also just on the topic of changing, if you're in a bad situation, you are not stuck there. Reach out to CSUIP, explain, and they will try to help you as best they can. Sometimes it involves moving you to a different housing situation or moving you to a different program or school, whatever it may be. They will do everything in their power to help you and support you. So if you're in a bad situation, don't stay there. Ask for help. So that was our last question. Would anyone else like to add anything on any of the topics we've covered so far, or any mental health related topic that we haven't covered but you think is important? If you'd like to say something on that before we close.
Yeah, I just want to like quickly add that we didn't really touch on this too much, but I'd like to bring up that for mental health services when you come back. So as a returnee for study abroad, it's really, you've changed, especially being away. People have been away for a semester or a year from the people around you when you come back. So I came and connected with, like, we had returnee workshops or whatever at Long Beach. Woohoo, it was great because you got to connect with people. So that's really important for mental health, is that returning phase, to really process it, use a diary, highly advocate for that, and you know, really go through your experiences. So
Yeah, just second that. Go ahead, Marley.
I was about to say the same exact thing you said. Like, I second that. Like, whenever they have like a returnee workshop, go to it. Like, if you go abroad, I highly recommend going to those workshops, just because even if like, one, it's kind of a mandatory thing, but also it's one of those things where you're really able to impact your experience about studying abroad and do it around people who might have shared similar experiences and similar, I guess, feelings about studying abroad and about coming back, and maybe like the reverse culture shock of when you do come back. To have that as a resource, I think, is so important. And I was invited to like a few of those kinds of workshops returning, because especially since coming back during COVID, there was a huge thing about like how, I guess, like sudden everything was, and the amount of people who just showed up to those workshops wasn't as many as I thought there was going to be. So like, for the people that did show up and like did talk about their experience, that was comforting. But I think, like others have said before, just really encourage going to those workshops, because it's such a good resource to be able to unpack that experience.
Yes.
Hopefully no one has to go for that abrupt ending like we did. No, like, hopefully that never happens again, because that was unprecedented. It was not normal that we got like a few days to leave the country. It was so stressful, so scary.
Definitely, yeah. This is not something that's normal, getting sent back. But so last year, all of the programs were suspended, and with a lot of the country's borders closing very quickly, we did have to get out of the country with only a couple of days notice. And one of the things that Marley mentioned was the reverse culture shock. So when you're going to a different country, you're expecting like, oh, things are going to be different. But when you're coming back home, things are also going to be different. And because it's something that you're familiar with already, you're like, nah, like I can deal with that. This is home. I grew up with this, but you've changed, and the people around you have changed as well. So there is that reverse culture shock. And this is actually a book that CSUIP sent us. It's called Maximizing Your Study Abroad Experience. And I know when you get it in the mail, a lot of people won't read it, but it has 3 sections, and it goes over pre-departure, in-country experience, and your I think it's post-country or post-study abroad experience. And so it goes over that emotional roller coaster ride of these are some things to expect. These are stories of different students, and these are the things they've done. So it gives you a lot of tools to deal with different situational things, and from a wide variety of countries to pull from. So I definitely recommend, just look through the sections of the book and see what's relevant to you. It's something that CSUIP sends out, so take advantage of it. And if you don't have a copy, it's called Maximizing Your Study Abroad. And I really like that it goes over your post-study abroad experience and what to expect when you're heading back home. Anyone else want to add closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think right now what we were talking about, like that post, study abroad experience is really important. I think for me, as someone who just kind of takes their own time to process things, one of the biggest things I kind of felt was just like a lot for me to deal with when I did come back from Spain was just like my friends and my family kind of just asking me, how was your experience? How was your experience and everything? And it was just like a lot for me to answer and everything because, COVID and everything that had happened. And so I really needed to take that time to just really process, what I had just experienced on my own. And so I think a lot of the time, as exciting as it is, I think it's also very important to remember that you have you are in charge of just like of processing at your own time. And it's okay if it's going to take a while, it's okay if it's going to take months, because I know for me, I'm still processing a lot of those things. And this is why I'm also an ambassador. It's because it's going to help me process and sharing my experiences and talking about what I've been through. It's helping me slowly. And at first I didn't realize it because it was just like, why can't I talk about like my time in Spain yet? But it's like, it's different for everyone. So, everyone kind of just goes through it all differently, but yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, I'll add a final thought of like, there's a major difference between like growing through discomfort and struggling and then suffering. And while you're abroad, you're going to experience a lot of discomfort and there's going to be moments that you're struggling. But just check in with yourself and make sure you're not suffering. And if you are, get the help that you deserve, because you do deserve to have a really special abroad experience. And it's still going to be uncomfortable and weird, and there's going to be conflict, but you don't need to suffer through that alone. And what I'm always reminded of is like, be creative and be resilient in how you take care of yourself, because you deserve to have like a beautiful journey.
Thank you so much, everyone. We are coming up to an hour 30, so I appreciate you spending the extra time and being here. These are alumni who really value their study abroad experience and want to share it with you guys and help you along in your journey. So thank you for that. And in summary, we covered a lot of the different topics that you might experience when you go abroad. So there are resources that can help you. So be sure to ask for help. And like Jessup said, you might not be comfortable talking to someone in administration, talk to a friend, whether it's a roommate, talk to people within your own cohort or somebody from your host country. Find ways of creating community around you, and take advantage of resources, whether that's your CSUIP coordinator, different departments within your host campus, or just something as simple as the insurance service and getting help for them in terms of medication or finding help while you're abroad that speaks your language. So we covered a lot. Thank you everybody for sticking around. And that's all from me.
Yes, that brings us officially to the end of this video. Thank you so much again to our alumni for being here and for answering all the questions. We really hope that this video helps anyone who faces any mental health challenges while they're abroad. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe down below, and check out some of our other social media platforms for more information on CSUIP, including TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, which are all at CSUIP. So we will see you all in the next video, and thanks for watching. Bye.